Hello, everybody. Welcome to Unfudge Your Marketing. This is a show where I chat with business owners about past experiences they've had with marketing that didn't go as planned or hoped, and really share those lessons learned and those key takeaways for all of you listening. I am Christy. I am your host. I'm a marketing strategist and consultant. I work with service based businesses who have relied on referrals and word of mouth to build their business. And they get to a point where they realize they finally need a strategic marketing plan to help them get to that next level in their business. Today, I am so excited to welcome Karen. Karen is a communication expert and confidence cultivator, empowering high achieving women to speak with confidence and clarity. She's a TEDx speaker coach and works with top companies such as NASA, Google, and Netflix. She is the host of the podcast Ignite Your Confidence and the best selling author of Trust Your Own Voice and Invisible No More. Karen's journey began many years ago in a boardroom where self-doubt left her tongue-tied. Determined to change, she developed her signature framework, the Confidence Cocktail, to help others find their voice. Her signature keynotes on the art of asking and how to become a confident communicator offer tangible tools to transform communication skills and career trajectories. With that, I will welcome Karen. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Hello, Christy. Looking forward to
I
this.
love reading your bio because I just love your mission. I love your why and what you're
Thank
so
you.
passionate about.
Thank you.
So I always like to give our listeners just a little backstory about how I know the guests that I'm bringing on. So you and I actually met through a mutual connection, Danny Hamlet. Hopefully she listens to this episode. We'll give her a little shout out for connecting us. And we've just kind of remained in touch over the past at least 2 or 3 years, I think, on
Yeah.
LinkedIn.
Yeah, we have. I know. It's
Awesome.
great. And you
So actually,
always give great content, by the way. So
oh,
for you.
thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I love following your content. I feel like you're always out and about doing things.
It's pretty much true.
I stay home a lot. I stay home. I do my thing here, but you get out and I love it. I would love to have a conversation today about, you and I chatted briefly before this, just kind of in terms of your own marketing journey for your business and really the fact that you have built your business. I was thinking of you as I did my intro, right? Building your business on referrals and word of mouth. And then you've had moments in time, right, over the course of your business where you've explored different marketing tactics or approaches. And so I would love to just have a conversation with you about that experience and how that's gone and what you've learned along the way. So where do you want to start?
Well, I do continue to be energized by the in-person events. So when I think about where am I my best, it's really in these environments where I am meeting people, where I'm out and about, whether I'm speaking or whether I'm attending. And that's what I've noticed just in the last 6 months. I've been to 2 big conferences in particular where I was an attendee, and that is where I also come alive. So I always say, I know that we don't have the luxury of meeting in person that often. And of course, Zoom is fine, phone calls are fine. But that's where I would say, when I think about, how can we, just thinking about the people listening to, how can we live and act in our strengths? And as much as we can put ourselves in an environment where we're able to basically show our best selves, then I would say go off and do that, because that is definitely one of the things that I've noticed. So of course I'm still navigating with I still enjoy all the other things, but there's something about those in person that really make me come alive.
I love that. I'm so glad you bring up this point because I feel like it is so aligned with how I approach marketing with my clients. I always say there's no one size fits all model. So you love doing in-person things, you should by all means do those in-person things. Somebody else may not, right? They may prefer to do things virtually or to find other avenues for their marketing efforts. And so I love that you're kicking us off with a really great point for everyone to consider as they navigate marketing their own business is you need to find what works for you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I like how you said, like, where you really come alive. I love that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because then as you were talking, I was thinking, and at the same time, sometimes, and I do think that it's a wise business decision, is we need to stretch ourselves outside of our comfort zone. So if maybe we're more drawn to the phone or we don't want to turn on our cameras in a virtual meeting, then think about, well, thinking always about the audience. What is the best impression that we're going to make? How are we going to influence someone in a way that builds trust and credibility quickly? And that's, of course, a huge part of what I do is how you're coming across through your facial expressions, your voice, your body language. And the more that we can create an environment where that's possible, such as Zoom, if not in person, then
Mhm.
even better. And then on the phone, it's amazing how quickly people can feel that trust or not in the tone of your voice.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's so funny because we haven't worked together, right, as each other's clients or anything like that, but we really are so aligned. I know why we get along. We are so aligned on so many things, and that is something that I also talk to my clients about too is like, someone popped into my mind as you were talking about that, like whether you want, pushing yourself outside your comfort zone and stretching yourself a little bit. I had a power hour with somebody a while ago, and he was talking about how he wanted to do, we talked about speaking, like, are you doing any speaking? Do you do any webinars or master classes and things like that? And he was like, I don't. And I was like, okay, well, do you think you'd be open to it? He's like, yeah, I really want to. Like, I'm very hesitant, but I know it's something I need to work through. And I love that about very like self-aware business owners who do have that inclination, like, okay, I know that I need to stretch myself. I know it's time for me to learn something new and push outside that comfort zone.
Yeah, and that is so astute. I mean, what do you call it? I want to highlight or underscore what you said around the self-awareness because many people aren't. And to be able to have that awareness and realize this is actually going to move my business forward. And that reminds me exactly of what a lot of people need to do that they're not doing is getting out there on video or even posting photos. And one of my very first coaches said to me many, many years ago, you don't want to be the best kept secret in your industry. And I always thought that was so powerful because if you're not visible, then how in the world would somebody know that you're available to be selected as somebody that they could do business with?
Yes. Yeah, that's such a great point. A lot of the business owners I talk to as well struggle with that like, getting out on video, and like you said, even just posting selfies or pictures of yourself, a lot of people are very hesitant to do that. And so
Yeah.
yeah, I think it is, like I said, there's no one size fits all model. We don't have to do everything that everyone else is doing. But when it comes to, like you were saying, building trust, people
Mhm.
need to see you in some way. And so figuring out how you can incorporate in that in your marketing efforts, I think, is really important.
Yeah. In fact, that also makes me think about this conference I was at this week because and this goes back to marketing. When you're consistent with posting, when you do a little bit every day, sometimes it feels like, is anybody even reading any of this? Is anybody noticing? And I will tell you, at this conference, there were 800 people there. And I had so many people coming up to me going, oh my gosh, I love your LinkedIn posts. Or, people would joke and go, oh, Karen's the influencer. We got to take selfies like Karen. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is hilarious. This is never something that I would have said a couple of years ago that people are saying that I'm known for. So you never know what can happen.
I love that. And when you started your story, I was like, I think I know where she's going with this. And I'm not surprised because you just have a presence about you, even, I mean, we've never met in person yet. But
Yes.
even just online, I can feel your personality come through your content. And
Oh,
so I'm not
thanks.
surprised that you got that feedback at the conference.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about, because you've been in business for how long now?
Officially since 2020, so 4 years. July, yeah, July will be my 4-year anniversary.
Okay. Oh my gosh, I thought it was longer than that.
Well, so
I don't know why I
there's
thought it
2
was longer.
phases. So
Okay.
2003 is when I first left my job as HR training manager and then went out to do more career coaching at the time because I have a background in HR. And then I've always had clients on the side hustle for most of those years, but then went back to corporate in 2004 or something and then left in 2020. So that may be what
Gotcha.
you're thinking. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
This
Yeah,
is like
that's
this
probably
time I feel like this was really, I mean, obviously I have a lot more experience now. This time feels like this is really it. Like seriously building a business. I mean, I learned so many mistakes from the first time. And speaking of marketing, that was one of the biggest mistakes is that I left with a great thing of savings ready to launch, but it was one of those things where I thought, "Oh, I'll just let people know and then I'll get business." And I didn't consider the power and importance of marketing at that time.
Yeah, so let's dig into that more. What are some of those things where hindsight is always 2020, where maybe you look back and you're like, "Oh, I really should have done this sooner," or realize that this should have been a priority?
Yeah, definitely getting I mean, that was also a long time ago. Social media wasn't really that much of a thing, but things like having a consistent nurture process of potential
Mm.
customers. I remember calling, I think I had 100 names that I started with and just started calling each of those people. And thankfully, I did make it that year, but it wasn't enough to, like, it was so exhausting. And so having a, as they say, funnel, which I always think is the funniest word, but anyway, having these things in place to have that lead generation be a lot easier rather than, oh my gosh, who do I need to call? I need to pay my bills. And not that it was that bad, but it was more of not recognizing the importance of having marketing things in place. So that's
Yeah.
one of the biggest things that I noticed. And it's so interesting how it's hard to look back sometimes and remember what was it like at that time. And so I don't remember how much social media played a role. I know it wasn't much for sure, but all the things that we're doing now are there's so much more opportunity available now, which is awesome
Mhm.
for sure.
Yes. Yeah, I think all the opportunities are definitely awesome. And I think that often leads to the overwhelm that I see business
Oh,
owners experience when it comes
mhm.
to marketing because there's so many things to choose
That's
from. And
true.
sometimes we feel like, I think a lot of business owners feel like I need to do all of the things, and that's just not
Yes.
realistic.
Yes. Well, and that's a very good point, thinking about a very specific example around how many platforms, do you do the, okay, I got to do Instagram and LinkedIn and TikTok and Twitter or whatever it's called now, and all these things. So that's also agreed, definitely. And I've been there with the overwhelm. So I think that's a good reminder of, for me, I always recommend that people do what's the most fun for them. And
I
when
love
we can
that.
think about it as, oh yeah, like I love Instagram stories and posting there, and I post several times a day. Now, sometimes it's not, well, most of the time I would say Instagram is not where my clients are coming from. So it's also, that was also a big aha for me. And now the good part is I'm aware of that. And so then I can take action in a more informed way. So for example, back in 2020, I hired a social media manager and basically got all the assets in place to brand, to create my brand and the colors and all of that. So slash marketing person. And I remember being so fixated on Instagram because that was their
Mm.
place and all their customers. And this woman did all the branding for Nike and a lot of big brands. And so I wanted to hire the best. And yet realizing it wasn't until a couple of years later that somebody reminded me, you're putting all this effort, or maybe not reminded me, it was an aha moment of, you're putting all this effort into Instagram. Is that even where you're getting your clients from? And that also was a good reminder related to the title of my own book is Trust Your Own Voice. Sometimes we look to other people too much. Like we hire these experts and obviously we're hiring them for a reason, but then there's a time and a place to step back and say, you don't want to just put everything in their hands. And that's one of the things that I have had to continue to learn is I am the owner of my business, not just tactically, but or intellectually. I don't know exactly how to frame this, but basically the bottom line is I've got to be very knowledgeable about the decisions that I'm making and strategic about why we're making them rather than saying, oh, I
Mhm.
really trust this person. Like I did really trust her and she was amazing and her company did a lot for me. But I realize in hindsight, I shouldn't have stayed so long with investing so much money into Instagram when that really wasn't even where my clients were coming from. But I was on the
Yeah.
train of, okay, I gotta get all this exposure. But
Yep.
I really should have started earlier, more consistently with LinkedIn.
Yeah. Wow, that is such a I feel like there's so many different little nuggets just in that example that you're giving. The trusting your gut, listening to yourself, asking questions. It sounds like that. It's interesting because this topic has come up with other guests on the show as well in terms of you didn't say this, but tell me if this is correct. Sort of that process of going out and vetting what services are out there and who you want to work with, and maybe not even being aware at the time what questions you should be asking
Yeah.
through that process that would help you make a more informed decision and help guide you in that process of selecting who you're going to work with and what tactics or things you're going to focus on.
Yes, I would say for sure. It really has been, when I think back now, and I think this is also really important when we consider the journey of life and the things that we are to learn based on experience that help us with our expertise, and the failures or mistakes that we have that help us to grow and learn. So many of us want the quick fix, and for sure that's me. Like, why isn't this happening sooner? Or, whatever this is in air quotes.
Yep.
But it's fascinating to me that when I really embrace and go, you know what? Why don't I enjoy what's happening in this moment now? Being present with the things, being grateful, and that saying of everything I prayed for, or everything I have, I once prayed for, and that was a dream. And then, as a lot of people, like, another one of my very first coaches said, Karen, there's no there. You want to go there, and then you're just here, and then you want to be there again. So you have to learn that you've got to get to a point where you are grateful and content with being here. Not that you can't have goals, and I'm a huge dream person and visualizer for sure, but I do think that if I had earlier recognized the power of the process, that would have
Yeah.
helped me have less. I would have had more enjoyment of the process for sure.
Yeah. Wow, that is a really powerful one right there. And it's so funny because as you were saying, like, you want things to happen now. I'm the same way. I'm really not a very patient person. When it comes to marketing, I'm always preaching to my clients, like, you got to be patient. You got to just keep sticking with it and keep putting
Mhm.
in the reps, I say, especially when it comes to
Yes.
creating content, and you got to stick with it, and the results will come, but you do have to be patient. Patience
Yes.
and consistency, I think, are two big things. So
Mhm.
easier for me to say than it is for me to even do myself.
Understood. For sure.
So, Karen, tell me a little bit, if we could kind of go into some of those. So, you gave the one example of like going out and finding a social media person, and
Yeah.
you thought that was going to be the answer. And then in hindsight, it's like, wait a minute, it actually wasn't the platform I should have maybe focused on at the time. And maybe I could have realized that sooner. Are there other experiences that you've had in your business where you've kind of you've got this feeling that like I need to do more, I need to do something different, and then what was that path that you kind of explored? Because I know we talked about that earlier as kind of like some different things, and then you always kind of came back to referrals and word of mouth are my biggest source.
Yeah. Well, I'd say the biggest thing that happened, within the last couple of years, is realizing that, well, first of all, when I set out about a year into my business, I said, okay, I really want to do this all the way, like, do it like full blown. So I hired a number of people. I had a chief of staff. It was great to be able to really act like a CEO and really lean into that role as opposed to getting in the weeds. And I think probably for every business owner that the biggest challenge is staying out of the weeds, really doing what we need to be doing strategically, vision-wise, and meeting the people that we need to meet and building those relationships. So I want to give that context because that's important for what I'm going to say next. So that was really wonderful. On one hand, amazing people that were working with me, and I had a lot of support, but I didn't plan the whole, just the fact that I might have been making really good revenue. I mean, I more than doubled what I made from my corporate career. So that first year. And so on one hand, you could go, wow, that's awesome, Karen. And it was when you look at it as just the two numbers alone. But realizing, oh, I have all these expenses now. And
Yeah.
this is getting to a point where I'm not even paying myself. We're just breaking even all the time. And so that's when I realized, what am I doing here? And I was so attached to that whole model that I didn't want to let those people go or reduce any hours, but I had to. I had to make some
Mhm.
decisions for my own well-being. And it's like they say so many times, and it doesn't matter what gender you are, but I'd say it definitely happens a lot with women, of always thinking about other people constantly on our brains. Like, oh, well, how will
Yep.
this affect this person or that person? And so that was a very big aha moment that I had when I realized, oh my goodness, okay, I have got to take some action here, or I'm going to have to pull into my savings, which is not going to be good. So
Yeah.
I had to change some things, have some challenging conversations that were hard because, of course, I want people to be able, it's not, anyway, it's hard to have those conversations because
Yeah.
people to have livelihood. And I know that I'm contributing to that through what I'm paying them. So, all this to say that it really helped me shift my business model and realize, okay, what do I actually need someone else to do? Where do I need to be in the weeds? And frankly, prematurely, that was something I did prematurely. As much as I recognized that I wanted to go out there and say, like, this is the ideal model and have it now, but it wasn't the smartest model for sure.
Mm.
So that's again going back to, well, what did I learn along the way is all these failures around, well, I don't know. I mean, you could call it a failure, whatever you want to call it. But that really shifted my business to be a lot more strategic, to pare down. And it helped me to look at, like, if everybody went away and it was just me, what would I need to do to keep things going? So that was very helpful. And then being able to pare down to the place that I was able to, then I've been really able to strategically use the people that I still have.
Gotcha. Wow. That's especially you. I really love the way that because I was going to ask that question, like, so how did you decide? And I love that you kind of said, okay, if it was just me, like, let's just
Yeah.
imagine I don't have any of the people that I've already brought on, like, then what? And starting from that
Yeah.
place. So, how did what can we talk a little bit more about that? Like, what you kind of
Yeah.
figure out are like the must haves versus the nice to haves.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I thought, well, I basically need somebody to do contracts for me. I always had a bookkeeper, like from almost day one. So she can send invoices and people can pay me. Of course
That's
it's working.
important.
Yeah, like all these automations are great. I have Active Campaign. That's what I had when I launched in 2020. I hosted a summit called Ignite Your Confidence, where I interviewed 21 influential women, and I got almost 1,300 people to join that. Of course, that was in 2020, so things are a lot different. I think the market is pretty saturated with summits at this point, or at least I'm saturated with summits.
Yeah.
But that was a very good thing to help me. So I say that because that helped build my list to about a
Mm,
thousand people at the time. Now, the other thing I learned is that most of them weren't necessarily my ideal client.
mm,
So some of them are still on the list. I think it's great to have a list, but at the same time, I think we can't really rely on any one thing. I think you just have to keep putting yourself out there. So that's the thing that I know I'm kind of going off on a little bit of a tangent with your question, but looking at, okay, the summit really helped. And then having, of course, sometimes I've found out some people don't even know what a lead magnet is or what a lead generator or whatever you want to call it, providing
yeah.
something for free on your website that people can download and then they're on your list. So you have that email. And my Instagram account, by the way, was hacked twice in the time, like the 3 years time that I was working, or 2 years when I was working with that company. So that was really Really hard. That was one of the hardest things I've ever been through, when you build up a following and then they're all gone. And that's a good reminder of making sure, as much as you can, to have the people and the contacts on your own platform, because any of these social media places could go away in a moment. And that's a great experience also from where I was on Clubhouse. I'm not sure, Christy, were you on Clubhouse?
For a brief stint.
Okay. Yeah. So a lot of people don't even know what it is. So I'll just clarify for anybody listening that it was a social media, basically a huge chat room with lots of different topics. And I built up a following with 10,000 people there. And I remember I was so fixated on getting more followers, and then COVID kind of disseminated, or whatever you want to call it. And people stopped being on that app. So I think that's also another good example of, you can build up a following, but you never know if they're actually going to be there tomorrow. So you can't rely on any one thing. And this is where it goes back to making sure, it's like finances. You've got to diversify. You don't want to put all of your effort in one place. So remembering, going back to, well, what did I have? I knew that if I just needed to make sure I know how to do contracts. I still have an email list, and I could still have somebody fractional to do those things. But thankfully I didn't have to go that bare bones, but definitely it has made me think a lot more about what's happening, rather than just sort of tuning out and letting my chief of staff make all the decisions. I mean, clearly she came to me, but I trusted her and the team so much that I was kind of almost disengaged. And on one hand, you could say, well, that's kind of the point, so I could focus on other things. But the bigger problem was I wasn't able to get enough business to be able to support this heavy load of overhead.
Yes.
So
what's so interesting about that last point too, Karen, is I have some of the other guests I've had on the show have talked about something similar with respect to even hiring marketing agencies, where they realized in hindsight that they were actually too hands off, that they just kind of let them do their thing, and they thought certain things were happening, and they thought there was a proactive approach, and they made a lot of assumptions. And in hindsight, they realized, I really needed to be more involved. I needed to ask more questions. I needed to still keep a hand in it. And I think that's so challenging, right? Because just like you said, business owners want to be able to offload things. We have so many things we're dealing with on a daily basis. We want to be able to offload. I think finding that balance between offloading while still staying connected to it. It sounds like you had a similar experience is important.
Yes. Oh, 100. I mean, I'm raising both hands. Yes, I relate to that so much. Yeah, because you want to trust these other people. And I think a lot of times we think, and I'll just speak for myself, but I've heard a lot of other people say this too, that when we feel like, well, they must know better than me, or, so they know better, I'm just going to be hands off. And I have learned so many times that, you know what, why did they do it this way? And I think it's such a good reminder too, that whether you're a business owner or whether you are an employee somewhere, no one is going to care as much about your business or your job than you. And that's why we have to be our own best advocate, no matter what.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that. Karen, I feel like we could talk for like another 30 minutes easily, but we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. Maybe we'll have to do a part 2 down the road. This has been so awesome. You have shared so many awesome nuggets. I do want to go back for a quick second and say thank you so much for hammering home the point about having an email list and not relying heavily on one social platform. I preach this all the time. I just did a video on it a couple weeks ago. It's so important. And I think really the lesson there, just like you said, I just want to reiterate it, is the diversifying. You have to have some different things going on. At the end of the day, I refer to it as like the organic foundation, which we've kind of talked about throughout here. It's like making sure you have a way to get out in front of people, making sure you have a way to get people on your list, making sure you have systems in place to stay in touch with them. That's central. And then, like we've kind of talked about, there's these other things that you can try out and see if they work, but you got to make sure you have that organic foundation built so that it can sustain all those other things that you're going to try out and see whether they're going to work or not.
Yes, totally.
So we are at time. Is there anything else, Karen, that we didn't talk about? Maybe a key lesson you really just want to hammer home that we already did touch on? How do you want to end our conversation here today?
Sure. Well, I've got two things. One that I wanted to mention for anybody in the spirit of marketing, that if
Yes.
anybody is interested in 9 words to avoid and what to say instead, that is something that you can get on my website. It is a free
Love
PDF.
that.
So that's a very helpful thing to increase your credibility. And then the other thing that I would say is to trust your gut. I know we talked about that already, but I feel like a lot of times we don't. We look to other people, and to take that moment and check yourself when you feel like, something says no or yes, listen to that and take a moment. And sometimes it's even helpful to actually put your hand on your stomach, going back to just the somatic, the power of really being in touch with your emotions and your body as well, that can be
Mhm.
a great way to ground yourself and go, okay, and maybe it's even hand on your heart, hand on your stomach, and taking a moment to go, what do I really need here, or what do I need to do? And that can help us to make the best decisions possible.
Yes, I love that. I learned that a year or two ago from a coach, and it was like this whole I was just never in the routine of like sitting quietly. Like just taking that time to
Most of
like
us aren't.
stop.
Right? Yeah.
Stop, like just stop. Like don't
I
be on
know.
your email, don't be on screens, just like stop and think and like
Yeah.
reflect on what is it that I need right now. So I
Mhm.
absolutely love that. I love that. It resonates big time.
Good.
Karen, thank you so, so much for coming on the show. There were so many nuggets of wisdom in this conversation. So I am very confident that listeners are going to walk away with, like, oh, I got some things to think about now. So thank you so
Good.
much for giving us your time and sharing your experiences. And yeah, people can find you on LinkedIn, right?
Yep, LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I've got a YouTube channel. I've got a podcast, all the things. So KarenLaus.com, and my last name is Laos, like the country.
Yes. Okay, awesome. Thank you so